Hi everyone, I'm Matt Arts. Welcome to a mini-series in partnership with the Royal Anthropological Institute of Great Britain and Ireland. This mini-series was created in anticipation of the upcoming Anthropology, AI, and the Future of Human Society virtual conference, which is being held from June 6th through the 10th of this year, 2022. So sit back and enjoy, and let's talk about the future. Hi everyone, I'm here today with Oded Ben-Tal. Today we'll be talking a little bit about artificial intelligence and music. So Oded is a composer, researcher, teacher working at the intersection of music, computing, and cognition. He's a senior lecturer of music technology at Kingston University, has a doctor of musical arts from Stanford and a bachelor's in physics before that, which is, obviously there is a relationship, but it does sound quite interesting to pivot from one to the other. And leading a new research network by the name of Data Sounds, Datasets, and Datasets Sense Research Network. And then as it relates to the upcoming conference, you're a convener of the AI and Creativity panel and presenting a paper titled Music Artificial Intelligence. And so we're going to talk about all that today. So Oded, thanks for participating in this mini-series. Would you maybe just share a little bit about how you got interested in music and particularly the application of machine learning to music?
So it's interesting that you started with the background of physics and music. So in a sense, I dithered until after my undergraduate degree. So I did actually two undergraduate degrees, one in physics at the university and one music composition at a music academy. So two very different kind of institutions and environment. And it was kind of interesting to walk from a class where they talked about linearity and it means one thing, and then go to the music class and it talk about linearity and it means completely different thing. So I did it about what I'm interested in and kind of compromise in a sense by going to do doctoral studies at Stanford, where one of the reasons I wanted to go there was because of computer music. So I was interested in the way technology can assist or is part of the creative process. And my kind of creativity, my own composition is the kind of thing that really is kind of the heart of what I'm interested in. How do we make music in all sorts of different ways? And that's how I ended up engaged in this machine learning approaches. I was introduced to this specifically through a colleague who also passed to Stanford, actually. And we worked together on a research that it also involved data and music. And he decided to apply a kind of text-based machine learning kind of LSTM specifically, that was developed for texts. And he found a data source of music in textual representation. So really characters, ABC characters, and applied that kind of machine learning to that really large collection of Irish tunes. And I think the initial thing is that we were surprised how relatively good the result was. So you don't, you get a computer that you don't feed it any information, any knowledge about music. You don't teach it music. We call it machine learning, but of course it's not really learning, or it's definitely not learning the way humans learn. It's kind of a completely different beast. And we were surprised that this relatively simplistic approach that you just show the computer a lot of data points can result in something that is kind of plausibly music related. And that started for us, this was kind of a sign that, okay, there's something interesting there. And we started exploring from that. And of course, one thing is that there is this kind of initial phase of you just kind of match, okay, I have data, I have technology, let's see what happens when I bring them together. But then the interesting, at least for us, the really interesting things happen afterward when you start asking your question, so what? So I have a system that can generate textual representations that are plausibly, or some of them are plausibly Irish tunes. Why is that important, or why is it useful? Is it useful? Is it threatening? Is it creative? And that kind of, what does we mean? What do we mean by creativity? What does it mean for the kind of future of musicianship? So these kind of questions are kind of the more interesting ones we think in the future, rather than here is a great system that can make music. And that led to both the panel on creativity and AI that Matt and I will be part of in next month, or a little bit more, right? And also to the data sense network that it's a proposal that I wrote with others and am now leading, which at a kind of basic level tries to ask, what are the gaps between music and data? Or what can data and music do together well? Or what kind of data is relevant to music, and how do we make that data more relevant, or more musical, and more available? And what are the kind of questions that we really need to be asking in order to really understand these kind of new ways of engaging with music?
Put us in a time frame. At what point did you start getting involved in using machine learning to assist creativity?
So I think that was 2016, thereabouts. We started working with that. And as I said, so we got a database of what it's called session music specifically. And it's music that's kind of originally these kind of dance jigs and reels and all that. But it's no longer kind of danced to, but it's kind of played in pubs and festivals and stuff. And it's, coming into it, you call it Irish music until you talk to people who are actually involved in it and say, well, it's not all Irish. Some there are kind of Scottish tunes and Irish tunes and Breton tunes, and there are Irish music that outside of it. So that was, for example, one of the things that this adventure brought us to, is that coming to a field from the outside, you see data and you think, okay, this is data, I'll plug it. And then when you start talking to people who know what this data actually represents, what is the actual music, there are all sorts of nuances and knowledge that is necessary to understand and interpret this data, that of course the machine learning is completely oblivious to, and is not part of the process until you start digging under and asking kind of musical questions rather than technological questions.
And that's kind of a good lead into almost where I was going, which was, I asked about the year just to get a sense of at what point you started using this technology, because presumably before that, in your own composition, you likely used other technologies to spur creativity. We all of us in the sort of the creative fields do, whether that's like Brian Eno's cards from the past, I forget the name of them right now, right? That sort of to help you sort of generate random ideas, or something like this. It's really just a tool that happens to present itself at a certain period in time, and we're choosing to sort of pull it into this process. But what I think, from my perspective, knowing a little bit about the field, what I think a lot of people get wrong is they think in many ways it's just writing everything for you, and you just sort of feed it the data and it's done. And I think a lot of people don't fully appreciate that a lot of people in this space are using these as tools to help spur creativity, and they're sort of mixing and mashing ideas. And so maybe you get out a little bit of a melody, but then you rework it, or you somehow continue on with it, expand it. At least that's the way I've been using sort of creative AI within the music space. It's never just presenting me with a whole idea that I use in full. So could you just maybe, for the sake of like the conference and the theme of AI, maybe talk a little bit about how in the music pieces you've created with this that you might be doing what I said or not doing that? Are you basically using it as a tool to help you, or is this like an end all be all in itself that it's just producing complete music for you?
Yeah, it's not an end all and be all, and it's not. I'm not even interested in offloading. I mean, some people are interested in kind of designing a system that will produce music and then stay true to the output of the system. This is kind of one approach. And that you're kind of in a sense, one step remote. You're composing you're composing an agent that will compose music. And my approach is different. My approach is, as you said, so I was interested before that in what kind of things can the interaction between me and a computer create, or how I can use the new technology as part of my compositional language or compositional tools. And machine learning was kind of one of them, became one of them. And I'm always interested in kind of trying the possibilities of a kind of new technology like that. And one of the kind of interesting things for me in that process is that what I thought will happen when I started is not what actually happened in the detail. So one of the things when we started looking at our Irish tunes, the Irish tunes that were generated by the system, we decided, okay, one of the questions is, how do we evaluate these tunes? And that's always a question when you're talking about creative systems. It's a kind of question, how do you evaluate it? It's kind of an important research question. It's not enough to say, okay, I produce something, the results sound good. That means the system is good. That's not science. That's not research. So when we thought about how to evaluate it, we thought, okay, I'm a composer. Let's pretend that this system is a composition student that comes to me with some pieces, and I look at them and evaluate them as composition, and kind of what can I do? And we discovered that it does some basic musical things. It knows how to take motives and transform them, and repetition and stuff. So when it came to my own music, which is sadly not traditional Irish music, I thought, okay, here I am. I'll just give the system some of my own themes, and I'll get some interesting variations on them that I didn't find my own, that I didn't invent. I didn't think about these kind of possibilities. And of course, that didn't happen at all. Once I gave the system that was trained on traditional Irish music things that did not sound traditional Irish, the system basically mostly broke down. So that was in itself a kind of an interesting thing, that prodding the system, interrogating it creatively, is a research method. You kind of, when you just let the system run on itself, you don't uncover the problem, or you don't uncover a lot of the kind of problems and the fragility of the learning and the limitations in it. So that what ensued from the kind of creative point of view is a long process of changing some parameters in the system, seeing what comes out and say, okay, I don't like this, and doing it again and again and again. And after 100 times, you start getting things that I did like. And I also started understanding how I can navigate this system. And that's one of the things that is interesting and problematic or challenging in machine learning, is that the relationship between the inputs and outputs is anything but transparent. So you can change some parameters. It's very difficult to know what will come out at the end. Unlike other kind of computer tools, where when you're doing some synthesis, okay, I can change the frequency and that will change the pitch. In these kind of machine learning, there is this kind of black box that does fairly complicated mathematics, and it means it produces kind of surprising results, which could be inspiring. But it also means that it's difficult for you kind of as a kind of work process to figure out what you want to do with it. So indeed, it's or kind of for me, the interesting bits of AI, creative AI, is not when you're kind of trying to automate things that we already know how to do, but when you're trying to discover things that you wouldn't discover in another way. And as you said, kind of this idea of kind of engaging with some new process to kind of inspire you to try new things, it has a long history in music, in other arts, I presume. To me, one of the interesting things specifically to AI is the kind of machine learning is that while it is not it's not human musicality, it does have musical traces, unlike, Brian Eno's cards, which are totally arbitrary in a sense. And that's their strength, right? That they're totally arbitrary, and you have, as a creative person, have to contend with this arbitrariness. In this case, if you want to co-create with an AI, you have to contend with some traces of human music that are not you. Right? And that's a kind of an interesting challenge in itself.
That is. And so maybe we can use that to relate it to the concept of what is musically intelligent, one of the questions you've kind of posed, and to connect that to the concept of, and maybe we can get to this part second, but it does seem to raise the question of, derivative work, right? And if we're producing new intellectual property that is trained on old intellectual property, essentially, on old music, who owns it, right? Who gets to say that they really created that? Is there any questions there? And so maybe we'll get to that in a second. But to build towards that, I guess I'll put back the question to you of what would you define as musically intelligent?
Yeah, that's a good and a really difficult question. Of course, we don't have definition of either music or intelligence, which already shows you the problem. But it's a combination of talent and skill and aptitude and underlying and things like imagination. So it's a kind of very vague notion. And I think once we start doing computationally creative systems, once we apply artificial intelligence to music, it really explodes this question that we don't really know. What does musically intelligent mean? There is a lot of implicit knowledge in doing music, which you discover when you try to kind of get computers to be musical. And that's not new to AI. If you look back at kind of some of the original, I do this in some of my lectures when I presented this. So one of the earliest pieces that we know, it's called the Iliac Suite. If nobody knows it, you can search it out. It's a string quartet written in the 50s using one of the original computers where they programmed the kind of rules of 16th century Western Renaissance music. And then I got the computer, okay, so now compose that music based on these rules. And the result sounds nothing like the music that it's supposed to be modeling, which tells you that, and the interesting that they took the rules from, these rules were a pedagogical tool that is still in use now, is still taught to music students in music academies as a way to learn music. And the fact that giving these computers, formulating them to computers, and then the computers produces music that is fine, but has no resemblance to the style, shows you that there is a lot of unwritten rules that we pick up on when we listen to music. And I think these kind of things are the really crucial bits about what being musically intelligent, right? Understanding what are the implicit rules and regularities, and what are more important, less important, and then gradually learning when you can break the rules and break the rules in kind of interesting ways, and what is different between breaking the rules in a way that is not musical and way that is musical. And there might be disagreement between you and me about what is musically appropriate at any given time. So there are a lot of implicit knowledge that goes into what is musically intelligent.
And arguably, there's certainly a conversation to be had there about cross culturally, what does all of this mean? Of course, which is a very lengthy conversation in itself. But when you speak of these rules, we are probably still programming rules per se, that are highly Western and are not necessarily inclusive of of all musical languages around the world. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, definitely. And for example, one of the issues that the research network that we are just started in January, we want to look at these issues of inclusivity and diversity and ethical use of data, and how do we avoid or try to expand what happens, to kind of repeat what happened in a lot of kind of data intensive fields where there are biases in the way the data is collected and presented, and that these biases get baked into the systems. And of course, it's a good notion to it's important notion to look at that and acknowledge that and see what you can do about it. It's probably not very easy to overcome this. For example, one of the things that our project started with Irish music mainly because we found the data, and that's kind of one of the things. The kind of what is the availability of data guides a lot of the research. And one of the things that we have been talking for quite a while and never managed to implement yet is, okay, can we now do this to non-Western music? I mean, we started with the kind of traditional folk music. Can we do it to folk music from somewhere else? And intriguing, and we are kind of very interested, but getting kind of what is the kind of data, and where can you get it, and where do you get the expertise to understand what you're doing, and matching all these together is not an easy problem. And there are some, I'm glad that now we're starting this network and we've been kind of talking to various people and doing some online seminars. And there are some instances of using data that is not Western art music. So we are kind of making slow progress in that, but it is a challenge.
As tools are coming onto the market already. I mean, obviously, there's Magenta and there's other projects out there that require you to have some technical aptitude to kind of get running and make use of. And then there are tools on the market, from tools from like Isotope that just help you clean up audio based upon machine learning, to tools that will help you write, basically chord progressions, melodies, bass lines, etc. And, they exist today in digital audio workstations at a relatively cheap price for nearly anybody to use. And so where I'm going with this is, do you think like this work over time could end up producing music that starts to sound even more repetitive than maybe, say, like, I'm speaking kind of in the pop space, whatever pop means at that given moment in time. as these tools become sort of, part of the norm, do you think they're going to result in like any kind of more repetitiveness because they're all, or many of them are going to be pulling from the same training sets? Is that something we need to worry about?
So I'm going to do a bit of a detour in the way of answers. So in the recent weeks, there was a copyright trial where Ed Sheeran was involved here in the UK. I don't know how widely it was reported. And one of the interesting things for me is that so he was accused of copyright infringement by some other artist, I don't know. And he was on the stand and he gave evidence. And essentially he said, I'm paraphrasing, pop music is all the same anyway. We all use only 5 chords and the melodies are almost the same anywhere for everyone. So what do you want from me? And I thought, as someone who has zero interest in pop music, yeah, I've been saying this to my students all the time. And now there is an authority that says that. So, and interestingly, he was referring back to Nina Simone, for example, and stuff. So not some very recent thing, kind of a long history of basically doing a kind of operating within a very limited, confined space. Now, whether these tools are going to make the music even more constricted, possibly. I think as I kind of mentioned casually before, I think the kind of for me the kind of really interesting challenge in new technology and AI for creativity is imagination. So, how do we get people to imagine a system, in a few years' time that can generate anything you imagine? So then the challenge becomes, how do you imagine something new, right? So, and how do you create a system, I think, even kind of closer than the kind of 20, 30, 50 years of system that can do anything. How do you create a system that, on the one hand, assists the human to create stuff, while giving that human more skills, developing their skills to imagine new things, rather than just repeat and recreate? And I think kind of this balance between assisting and channeling into kind of very limited avenues is, I think, the real challenge of this new technology. Now, on kind of, I'm somewhat surprisingly optimistic about this technology, in a sense that, like a lot of technology, I think the most interesting things will happen when people start breaking it. And I think there's things that are already happening. Kind of people who are not just using it for what it's supposed to be supposedly doing, but finding ways to subvert it and break it and find where it's not quite operating and finding interesting stuff in there. But of course, this is not something that most people will do, right? So just like the TV and the turntable and whatever things, most of us use it in the way it was designed. Some of us try to find innovative ways of using it.
Yeah, I'm with you. A very simple example there is like, say, in Apple's Logic, there's the drummer program. I will take that and use it to maybe like make a handpan, melody out of, because it has an element of repetitiveness, and I find it sort of lends itself well to doing things like that. And so, I like trying to bend the tech always, and think, like you say, sort of people on the edges will also share a little bit of a worry that it will, that the majority of use might just use it in the way that it's intended. But I guess maybe a bigger question there, though, is related to IP. And say in the case of with these Irish, the sort of Irish folk pieces that you had, obviously the music that goes in as the input has this meaning around it. Those songs are written in a certain period of time to reflect any number of things. They've been embodied in the culture in such a way where many people will have a fondness of those. And so coming out of the other end, I guess two things like what do you think if you were to play that for people who really love traditional folk music, Irish folk music, do you have you done that and have they had any reaction to it in any way? Like do they recognize it? Does it make sense to them? Does it have any meaning?
Yes. So we actually did it in several ways. We actually recruited some musicians and recorded an album of music that it was mostly tunes generated by our system and selected by one of the musicians, fairly carefully selected and curated and with minor edits, and a few real traditional tunes. So, sorry. So we recorded this album, and we first we did a kind of a mini experiment. So we released it surreptitiously with a kind of with a cover story. And it was totally acceptable within the very small communities of people who look at those things. And it got some reviews, it got some radio plays. And then we told the people who reviewed actually this, the actual story. And one of them got back to us with kind of fairly detailed and interesting comments, and re-listening to it in after kind of with the real story. He kind of picked out on kind of specific things like this part is very similar to 19th century and this part is very similar to the things that this band was doing in the 80s. Which was kind of interesting, kind of a lot of nuances and local and kind of very detailed knowledge that, of course, we didn't have when we made the system. But this, of course, it's not a kind of, remember, we actually got human musicians to carefully select and construct this and play this. And this is a type of music that is, the extemporizing that players do on the spot is really important. So it's not so much as a kind of proof that computers can be creative. It's more of a proof that this system can prompt people to be creative. And the players we recruited, they actually, for example, one of them said that initially, when he was approached about this, we did some concerts before we did we did kind of as part of events. But one of the guys who was involved in it kind of was very reluctant at first because of the kind of computer music. Why computer generated tunes? Why should I do that? But then he actually liked some of the tunes, and he said, "I really want to play them." And that was the reaction, kind of the mixed reaction. So within this community, we did several things, interaction with these kind of session musicians and the people. And some people have a very negative reaction conceptually and ideologically and all sorts of stuff. And some people, the part that we kind of are more in tune with is people who say, okay, there is potential there. I can use it. I can take this. And they were kind of making interesting comment that the tunes that they currently play have a murky history and probably evolved and kind of were polished by many generations of people. And the other final thing I will say, which is about this, the music is connected in story. One of the players that we involved in told us, who studied this as well, said that, if you look, so often when this music is played by someone in the festival, they will start with a story. This is a tune I heard in the dine. I learned it from something. And if you go to their different performances, they'll tell the different stories every time. And they're all fictional stories. There's very little true in them. But they sound good and they connect with the audience and the audience kind of buy them. And they it's a kind of game in a sense for some of these players they kind of know this, that they can invent whatever story or however outlandish it is, and people will buy it. And I was surprised that the really thin cover story that we provided for our album was accepted without, and I thought we will get caught immediately by the lies, but everybody just took it. So in a sense, it tells us that it is part of culture. There is a kind of surrounding contextual thing within a kind of mini subculture, but it's kind of malleable, and there are a lot of fiction and fiction making in there as well, where computers or artificial intelligence or artificially intelligent machine learning produced tunes can slot right in without doing any harm.
Just curious, what do you hope to, what do you want to see come of all of this, of all the research you're involved in? What would be the end game?
Well, there's no end game. There's just an ongoing development. So I'm interested in, again, this kind of co-creation, kind of various ways in which a human and a computer can work together to create music. And this involves both kind of, I do it as a composer, I kind of work with the system. I also do it in kind of live situation, kind of improvised or semi-improvised situations, where the computer is kind of an active agent who kind of listens to the performer and reacts. I think what I would like to see for the kind of creative AI field is a field that is less or moves away from a kind of technologically deterministic mindset where it's all about developing new machine learning methods. And that is complemented or in addition to that, happened a lot of kind of questions about the practice where this is coming from. So instead of just doing, okay, let's find a technology that can make paintings, let's do kind of development that's kind of informed by art history and art appreciation and critical discourse. And a lot of the knowledge that was accumulated in arts and humanities about asking the right questions, about where can this technology can add and open the field of creative practice, rather than focusing on how this technology can replace humans in some tasks, which I think is not conductive, and it's also not very plausible. I mean, in some circumscribed instances, like maybe mastering tracks, for example, or this possibly. But I think the more interesting question is not how technology can replicate human activities, but how it can do something that we can't do.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great place to end it. So if anybody's interested in getting in touch with you, where's a good place to find you?
I have a website it's one of the Wix websites. If you search for me, you'll find it. And the Folk RNN project is folkrnn.org, where you can find. And then the current research network is musicdatasense.org. Let me check that this is actually correct, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah, musicdatasense.org and we have online seminars every month, and also some other kind of videos and stuff that we're gradually collecting.
Well, Oded, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks all for listening. For more information on the Anthropology, AI, and the Future of Human Society virtual conference, visit the Royal Anthropological Institute's website. I'm Matt Artz, and I hope to see you virtually at the conference.